Gannon Buhr is absolutely cracked on the putting green, and honestly, if you gave the guy a paper plate, I think he'd still be better at putting than pretty much all of us.
Gannon Buhr to apply.
I had to apply the pressure, use my hidden treasure. For the win.
But Gannon in Discmania still decided to remake the PA3, and I do think that says something about this putter. The brand new P2X, it's a beauty. I've been putting it for the last week or so on and off with the PA3.
There's 3 keys to disc golf: driving, approaching, and putting. You need all 3 to do this disc sport.
And I really like it. It's a beauty. Okay, today we're going to be talking about the P2X, comparing it to the PA3, as well as a little comparison to the KC Pro AVR, because I think this disc just might bridge the gap between the PA3 and the KC AVR, which is something I've been looking for quite some time. Right away, I want to give you guys a quick little throw comparison. Both of these are relatively fresh. They've been seeing putts for the last week, but not a single throw. So as you can probably tell, they fly pretty much identical. Straight, a little bit of stability. I personally think the PA3 is one of, if not the best throwing putters on the market. It's definitely the best beaded one in my opinion. I love them. They beat up to be straight and then they get that late turn. Absolute beauties. If we look closely at the profile of these two discs, they're pretty much identical, guys. And I love it. For most of the season, Gannon was putting a link, and honestly, I think if he went the rest of his career with the link, it wouldn't matter. He's just that good. But I do really think it says something when Discmania takes pretty much the PA3 and rebuilds it. DGA did it earlier this year with the Sonar. Chris Dickerson has been putting the Sonar for, I think, the back half of the season. And clearly, when he got his hands on a PA3, or, you know, PA3 clone, he went right back to it because it's such a good disc. The PA3, I think, for Prodigy players that have left the team, I bet it's the one disc that a lot of them would be like, yeah, I would still bag that disc, you know, if they had an open bag or something, because it's just that good. So you could probably tell these fly pretty much exactly the same, straight, stable, good flight, nothing crazy. I think a PA3 really shines when you start getting it beat up. You know, start getting that late flip out of it. It's just workable. You know, they don't go too far. A PA3 is a relatively low glide, stable putter, and I think that's why Gannon obviously really liked it and then decided to make his own. But I will say, the PA3 is kind of a small diameter putter, and if you just look at it right here, the P2X is much bigger. And now Gannon's massive. He's got massive hands. So I'm sure a little bit of extra size on the disc is probably great for him. Me personally, like I said, I've been putting these back and forth for about a week now. I'm still leaning towards the PA3. And I honestly wanted to love the P2X for putting. But I've always been a guy who likes a smaller putter, more like a little bit lower. You know, these also, the P2X is a little bit deeper. It's almost like if you took a PA3 and just bulked it up just a tiny bit. And now insert the KC Pro AVR, the third one in this comparison for today. Now this is a really beat up KC Pro AVR, so it's not really gonna fly the same. But for me, these two have always been some of my favorite putters. I constantly find myself switching back and forth between them. Very similar in the terms of just a beaded neutral putter with a good fade at the end. Much more glide out of the KC AVR. But the PA3 hand feel, I think, is something that you just simply cannot beat. It's so good. I think anyone who's used a PA3, they've probably loved the feel of it. Maybe the only thing that drew them away was just the lack of glide. And that's where I think the P2X kind of bridges the gap between the two. You have a little bit more depth closer to the KC Pro AVR, but you have the exact same hand feel, that perfect hand feel of the PA3. So the flight of the P2X or PA3, it's nothing crazy. It's no different than really any other putters, and I think really the reasons I do like it is because they don't go that far. You know, you could be throwing like a P2 or a beat up P2 or something like that, and those are gonna go really far. The PA3 kind of like limits the distance you can get out of them. Obviously, they're still going to fly pretty much the same as most putters, but I do think they have a little bit of a break on the end where you're going to get a really controlled flight. And I think that's something I really like. It really separates the difference between the putter and the mid a little more than I think some of these faster putters out on the market would. If you're interested in picking up any of these 3 putters, the PA3, the P2X, or a KC Pro AVR, head over to powergripusa.com. They have all 3 in stock. Use code Broderick10. It's going to save you 10%. It's going to help directly support me as well. If you're a PA3 putter, I do think you can just stick with it. I think it's one of the best putters ever. But if you've been in the mood to spice up your life and try something new, the P2X is probably the disc that like you've been looking for forever. If you have bigger hands, maybe the P2X would be a great option. Maybe if you tried the DJI Sonar and you were like, I like this, but it just ain't quite it, try a P2X. I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Let's hit the putting green and see how these are flying. We'll talk a little bit more. So the PA3, I just think is super comfortable in the hand. But I will say the lack of glide sometimes on a fresh pair kind of turns me off just a little bit. But if you do the work, get a PA3 pair seasoned in to where they start pushing a little more, you really can't beat it. Ugh. And that's kind of where like the KC Pro AVR I like, because although new, they do have some good stability as well. They just glide straight. But as you can see, that release, because of the deepness, that happens to me a decent bit, and you don't want that. Something about the way that I kind of spin them out on the KC AVR is like I love the flight and the push I get out of them, but I get a little wobbly release. Even I'll have rounds where I putt great with the KC AVR, but every putt the whole round was just super wobbly. As many of you know, about 8 months ago I started putting left-handed, and it quickly made me a lot better. And since then I feel like we've drastically improved. Now we're still gonna miss some putts here and there, and that's fine, but we're getting there. And obviously matching yourself up with a putter that just instills confidence is kind of half the battle. And with the PA3, I just think that's it for me, you know? Not saying the P2X couldn't also be that, and that's why I'm interested in this release. I'm blaming my other putter on that one, because they both feel really nice. But I do think the slight lower profile, the slight smaller diameter of the PA3 is just, it fits a little better. I think when you stick with the putter, a lot of it is obviously the hand feel, so you want to stick with that hand feel and not confuse things. You don't want to be jumping back and forth between beadless, between beaded, whatever it might be. I think jumping back and forth between a P2X and a PA3, probably not the worst thing you could do, because they're basically the same. And I want to see how a pair of these kind of work in. Have you guys tried these out yet? I'm sure tons of people went and placed that pre-order that came out like a month or 2 back. And I'm sure there's plenty of you that are really liking this. I think this is a big addition to Discmania's lineup, in my opinion. Their new releases throughout the last couple of years, I think they've had a few winners. The DD1 and the FD1, I think, are Discmania's reinvented, or whatever they're calling it. I think those are their best molds. I think they're so good, they're so consistent. And to be honest now, I think you can throw the P2X right in there with it, because this is a great disc. A couple steppers here, probably just from, I don't know, maybe 40. Oh, dang it. Got lucky on the first one, I guess. Come on. Oh, I'm actually putting them too far. My stepper needs work, guys, that's for sure. But I hope you could see how you can kind of hang them out. Like I was hanging them about right here. And then if you play them right, you can kind of get them to dive right in. So something that I think will be interesting is next season, if Alden Harris and Gavin Babcock switch over to the P2X, because obviously they're both putting links right now. They both came from Prodigy, came from putting PA3s as well. Well, they also make the switch, because they're obviously such a similar disc, but the link, I would actually say, is a little bit more similar in actual just size to the PA3. So it'll be interesting. It'll be cool to see if they do switch, because I think that really just does kind of justify the idea that the PA3, or at least like the PA3 mold of putter, which there's tons of beaded putters out there. You know, you may think like, oh, the Wizard and the PA3 are the same. They're not. I think the biggest difference in this mold, which the DJI Sonar has it as well, is literally the flat like bevel that connects the bead to the edge. I think that's really the biggest difference, whether or not you put your finger there, but it definitely has something to do with this mold and kind of how it tends to fly. Keeps it very consistent. These two that I specifically got are actually a little bit concave, just so you know. Maybe they're all like that, which I'm not mad about, but some of you might get it and be like, a slight puddle top putter, kind of interesting. But just gonna ching some putts. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one.
Creator of Frisbee Club, motherfuckers.
The man, the myth.
And right here, I have a frisbee bag. It holds all my frisbees, the ones I like.